Hey everyone, it's Don. I'm bringing you the second half of my trip to New Mexico via a podcast format. I had a technical error and lost my footage of the areas around Taos and parts nearby. And so I'll bring this part of the trip to you via photographs that I took along the way. Fortunately, I did that, and I think I can still tell the tale. So let's go. After climbing Italia Mountain outside of Santa Fe and just about wearing myself out, I headed north to the Taos area. Okay, and near Taos, you have the Rio Grande Gorge, which is a roughly 60 to 70 mile gorge that extends from near the border of New Mexico and Colorado to 20 to 30 miles south of Taos itself. So when you visit this area, one of the things that lots of people like to do is go visit the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge and walk across it and take a look at the Rio Grande from that viewpoint. And then you can hike in areas nearby. So let me take you on a walk across the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge and down the Rio Grande Gorge a bit, and then to a few other sites along my trip back to Albuquerque from Taos, New Mexico. In the first picture is what you see on the east side of the bridge, the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, labeled quite appropriately at the moment. This bridge is the second highest highway bridge in the U.S., and it was completed in about 1967. All right, and previous to this bridge being built, one would have to go dozens of miles in either direction up and down the Rio Grande Gorge to be able to cross the river because there was no bridge in this vicinity. So this view here is from the east side of the bridge where I began my walk. And so at this point, I will proceed west across the bridge to the next stop. Before I do that, I just wanted to give you a view from downriver just a bit of what the Rio Grande Gorge looks like. Okay, so there you can see, you can't fully see the river from this viewpoint. This is from some distance down the west side of the gorge, looking back probably 200 to 300 yards upriver toward the bridge. So you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start my walk on the east side of that bridge. Beyond that point, you can see the mountains of northern New Mexico, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and including the highest mountain in New Mexico, which is in this vicinity, of roughly 13,000 feet. Nonetheless, I'm going to proceed across the bridge to my first stop right in the middle of the bridge. Okay, so here I am with the river north to my back, approximately halfway across that bridge. This bridge is 650 feet above the water surface, and it's just a dramatic view. It's a little bit wobbly when you get out in the middle of this bridge. And of course, this is a highway bridge, so there are cars passing by, and people will be walking, across this bridge, tourists and so forth. So it's quite a number of miles outside of town, so it's not like there is town just nearby. But of course, this is not far from some occupied areas. It's a little creepy when you get out there. The fence along the bridge is not very high. It only reaches about chest height. And it's, you could imagine yourself tumbling pretty easily over that bridge. Now, unfortunately, people do visit this bridge to do that on purpose. Since it was built, about 130 people have jumped to their death from the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge as late as the last couple of years. And so that's obviously a big problem. And when you get out on the bridge, there are a couple of stops where there is signage and there are helplines where you can, if you're feeling this way, and it's possible that your mind could be changed, you can actually dial in to a helpline and talk to a counselor while you're out there. And so it's not known how effective this is, but it is a nice gesture nonetheless. If someone does hurtle over the bridge, it's obviously a very sad thing to have happen. It's also a pretty laborious, retrieval operation. I've read it takes something like 2.5 hours for a crew to get down into this gorge with the proper gear to retrieve someone who's done this. So nobody wants this to happen, of course, and it's a problem. Now, when I was out there, I read some stories about how the locals were trying to figure out ways to deal with this, and including increased security and things like that near the bridge. I didn't really see that. You just can't police all the people all the time, especially at night. So nonetheless, when you're out there, it's an awesome sight, and it's one that you want to come back to revisit. Okay, my next view then is down upriver again behind me, and with a little clearer view. And you can see at this point the river has slowed. It's a long pool, and you can see kind of the greenish hazy tint to it, which would be from algae essentially in the water. But outside of the river, you can really see how dry the landscape is. So this is in the high plains area of northern New Mexico. These elevations at the top of this river gorge are around 7,000 feet or so, okay, with the mountains behind reaching about 13,000 feet. In this view, you can also see the bridge shadow, okay, down below. So that's facing north. If you turned around and went to the other side of the bridge and looked south, this is the view of the gorge looking south. As you can see, if you look at the river, it is much more rapid, okay? So approximately right underneath the bridge, that long pool transitions into rapids. And the Rio Grande is obviously popular for fishing, but also boating, kayaking, canoeing, and so forth. And there are type 4 rapids on the river. I didn't see anybody when I was there boating down the river, or anybody at all down in the gorge, only on top of the gorge. But people use it that way nonetheless. In our next view, then, I've crossed the bridge to the west side. And on the west side, there is a visitor center with some signage indicating that this is a location for the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. And behind this monument, there is a rest area, picnic tables, and the start of the West Rim Trail. So what I'll do now is take a little walk down river, south along the river, and show you a few sights of the gorge and the bridge as I walk down the river. So here I am, probably about a 1/4 mile or so below the bridge down the West Rim Trail, looking north. All right, and again, you can mostly see the river here where it's slowed down in a long pool. Here's a view just a little bit beyond that, okay, where you can see the river go from the pool to the more rapid run. This is approximately, maybe not quite 1/2 mile down the river. Okay, but again, that distance from the bridge surface to the river is 650 feet. This is also a good view to see how dry it is, as I mentioned, and sparsely vegetated it is. Okay, there's not a whole lot of, certainly not woody plants in terms of shrubs and trees, just a few in this area, but there is some low-growing herbaceous plant material that was not growing when I was out there, and just a handful of woody plants here and there. Here's a view just a little bit farther down. What you can now see in front of me near the base of this picture is some sagebrush. Okay, and so sagebrush is a very low growing shrub, common in these high plains, dry, arid areas in New Mexico. Smells great, of course. And so that's a view that captures a little bit of the vegetation that actually is there. The other thing I was on the lookout for, which I unfortunately did not see, were desert bighorn sheep. These are an endangered species in the area. There's a small herd that exists around Taos, and they would occupy these canyon walls in the flat plain areas as well. We have seen them on visits in the past, but I didn't see any on this visit at all, okay? It's possible there were some there, but without binoculars, which I failed to bring, I couldn't see any. Here's a view now from about the same vantage point looking south, and just again showing you more of the gorge, and again how strikingly dry it is, other than the river itself. All right, the West Rim Trail then continues along the top, what would be the right of your photo right there, and for a number of miles. There's a south point where you can access the West Rim Trail. This would be the north end of the trail. I saw a handful of cacti along the way, given how dry it is, and this is a species known as a hedgehog cactus. On it, it really wasn't actively growing very much when obviously you can't tell whether it's growing or not, but the sort of dark brown specks you see in and amongst this cactus were the remnant flowers from last season. So it produces a very beautiful pink flower. This species is often grown ornamentally in gardens and so forth. And so I would love to be back there when this thing is actually flowering, because they're quite beautiful, but obviously they weren't doing that when I was there. So that and sagebrush and a few dry herbaceous things were the only things around when I was there. This whole area would light up when the rains come later in the spring. All right, now underneath the highway leading to the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, I thought I would point out this. I mentioned desert bighorn sheep. What you're seeing here, this culvert, this dry culvert that crosses under the highway, is actually a wildlife corridor, a wildlife tunnel to help animals move from one side of the highway to the other without risking getting killed on the highway. And so these were built probably primarily for use by desert bighorn sheep to minimize them getting killed on the highway, but really anything at all can use them. And so there were a few of these spaced out along the highway leading up to the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge. And so although I didn't see any desert bighorn sheep when I was there, I could see some footprints using this passageway underneath the highway. All right, now before I leave the Rio Grande Gorge area, I'll show you a couple more pictures from several miles upriver. So I traveled about 20 miles upriver, maybe 15, where the gorge sort of widens out and it's much easier to access. There are some roads that get you down to the river. And one such spot is an area called Black Rock Hot Springs. All right, so you can drive to this spot, cross a bridge, which is just about at the far end of the river that you can see here, drive up to a point and park, and then walk about a quarter mile down the river. And so this is a view of the Rio Grande in the vicinity of Black Rock Hot Springs, which I visited pretty late in the day, but produced some beautiful colors here, I think. Here's a shot just a little bit farther downriver, right where the hot spring exists. So first of all, if you look at the rocks there, you can see why this is called Black Rock Hot Springs. These are all rocks of volcanic origin. They can vary in color. Some of them can be very dark and black. Now, the little natural hot spring that's present there consists of just a couple of sort of tubs, if you will, that people have built little rock walls, arranged and rearranged several times, as you can see. And they just house a little bit of warm water, probably the temperature of bath water, prior to that water entering the river. And so there were people occupying the hot spring when I was there, so I didn't take any pictures of the springs themselves. And I was late in the day, so I didn't go in it myself. But I talked to the people and witnessed their experience. So it's, a lot of people go here to hang out, enjoy the hot springs. It's a little walk, and then you walk back, and that's it. All right, it's not commercial at all. There are lots of hot springs spaced across northern New Mexico. Some are a little bit on the commercialized side, and some are wild and just, open to the public like this. All right, after my visit to the Rio Grande Gorge area, I then headed over toward Los Alamos, which of course is very famous for the research they have done there on nuclear power and nuclear weapons. So let me show you a few shots from my drive from Taos to Los Alamos first. And first of all, this striking bit of scenery is something you see roughly between Santa Fe and Los Alamos. And so this is Black Mesa. This is on the San Ildefonso Pueblo. So to access it, you require special permission, which I didn't have at the time. So this is a shot just from the roadside. This site is famous because of that members of the Pueblo at one point in their history had conflicts with the Spaniards who occupied this area. And they fled to the top of Black Mesa and fended off, the invading, Spaniards, and held their ground for some period of time. And so this site is revered, not only for its special nature as a mesa, but for its history as a site where the Native Americans that lived in this area have, held their ground against the Spaniards. So that's Black Mesa, again made up of quite dark rock that can appear black, especially depending on your perspective. Okay, after passing Black Mesa, I started to crawl kind of back uphill a little bit. And this is just a little overlook on the way to Los Alamos, just across this vast landscape, which here you see more woody plants than I showed you up near Taos. And those trees, again, would be pinyon pines, some ponderosa pines down near the river wash, and things like sagebrush and creosote bush as well. It's just a very striking landscape. In the background of this landscape is Atalia Mountain that I climbed overlooking Santa Fe. So those mountains in the background there are in the order of 9,000 to 11,000 feet. And again, with the tallest mountain in New Mexico being in the Taos area at around 13,000 feet. In Los Alamos, I just simply made one stop outside of lunch, and that was at this museum. This I stopped at the recommendation of a friend and colleague of mine named Kevin Bradbury, who was a naturalist in Ohio. And this science museum was basically founded or sponsored by the Bradbury family, of which he's a member. And this is a museum that tells the story of how the Los Alamos National Laboratory came to be, talks about the development of the Little Boy and Fat Man nuclear warheads that were used in Japan, and the outcomes of that, and how the National Lab, what it does today, okay, in terms of developing its understanding of radiation and nuclear power, and how that can be harnessed to do other sorts of things in engineering and the biomedical sciences and in agriculture and environmental science and so forth. So this was a really fascinating museum. Highly recommended. It's free. It's sponsored by the laboratory, and definitely worth a visit if you happen to be in Los Alamos. Okay, now after this, I simply crossed the National Laboratory, and there I have no footage because you're not allowed to take any pictures when you cross the National Laboratory's property. And moreover, you can't even turn off the highway, or they don't want you to take any turns. So you're let through the gate with instructions to take no pictures and do not turn left. So that's exactly what I did. Now, where I was headed was out south of Los Alamos, curving my way back toward Albuquerque to visit my next stop, which is Valle Grande. Okay, now this area is basically an ancient crater left behind about 1 million years ago by a gigantic volcano. If you read this sign closely, this volcano ejected a volume of material that was 500 times the amount ejected by Mount St. Helens. It's huge, okay? Produced this huge bowl surrounded by smaller hills, okay, that were again created from magma during that eruption. And it's just filled in with vegetation and a few trees. It's fairly dry out there, but this area is a major grazing area for elk, which I was also looking for, unfortunately did not see. All right, so let's take a look at Valle Grande. This is just maybe one of the more amazing pictures I've ever taken. Okay, these pictures were all taken on my cell phone, by the way. I just have a simple Android, folks. But you can get these kinds of scenes out there. It's just a beautiful day as well. Okay, the low area that's just grassed is the bowl, the crater of the ancient volcano. And the mounded hills in the background were hills formed from magma during those eruptions, okay, about 1 million years ago. So that's a shot as you drive down the highway looking kind of back and to the north and west as you near this area. Okay, my next 3 shots will be of this same area, a little bit farther down the road, and they're pieced together. So they go together from north to west to a little bit more south. So I'll first take a look at the view north. This is outside the influence of any of those trees. Okay, you see that there is a fence there. That fence there is to hold in grazing animals, although elk graze wild out there. There would be cattle as well in some of these areas. Again, just a dramatic landscape. Here's looking a little bit straight west now, slightly south of the picture I just showed you. And then we have a view looking more south. Okay, you can just see the extent of this bowl and just the dramatic scenery. Just amazing. When I was here last in 2009, we did see a herd of elk out there. Unfortunately, not this time. Now, I was so intent on seeing elk, I was driving too slow on the highway nearby, and the ranger pulled me over, told me I was driving too slow. So keep that in mind as well. My last stop then, as I curled my way out of Valle Grande, was near Jemez Springs. And this is the area where the famous red rocks of Jemez exists. All right, so just a view, the beautiful colors. If there's one thing about New Mexico, it's one word you could use to describe it, it is colorful. Greens, blues, reds, tans, browns, black. When the rains come, the flowers burst into bloom. And so New Mexico is all about colors. Okay, and with that, I'll conclude this episode. And even though this did not include any video footage that I had tried to provide for you, I think these pictures tell the tale pretty well. And so if you ever get the chance to go to New Mexico, particularly northern New Mexico, parts Albuquerque and north, do it. You won't be sorry. Okay, so till next time, I'll bid you adieu. This is the Naturalist signing off. Bye-bye.